Hi students. So let me analyze each and every question of this paper. Um, Let me come to the question number 23. XeO3 can be obtained by the complete hydrolysis of. So you know from group 13 to group 18, hydrolysis of halides is an important topic. And if you have any small doubt in that, it is high time you revise it. And if you remember, in maximum cases you will get the hydrolysis products logically. Water attacks partially positively charged center. The halides come out one after the other. P-pi D-pi bonding. So taking all these into consideration, you can write down the products. But in the case of 2 or 3 halides, the hydrolysis reaction is redox. And one example for that is XeO3. And XeO3 reacts with water, XeF4. XeF4 is one of the halides, which is an exception actually. XeF4 plus water, that gives XeO3 plus Xe plus HF plus O2. Similarly, XeF2 is also an exception. XeF2 plus water, that gives xenon plus HF plus O2. Okay, if you see other two options here, hydrolysis of XeF6, hydrolysis of XeO2F2. So, if you remember, XeF6 hydrolysis occurs in 3 stages. In the first stage, you will get XeOF4, and in the second stage, on further hydrolysis, you will get XeO2F2, and if you hydrolyze it further exhaustively, you will get XeO3, and in each and every step you will get HF as the side product. In the first step, 2 water molecules attack. In the second step also 2 water molecules. In the third step also 2 water molecules. So the answer for this question will be C. 1, 3 and 4. And you are not getting XeO3 from XeF2. Okay, now let us come to the next question. You are given a complex actually. He is saying the trans isomer of that given complex is Vaska's complex. That means the examiner himself is saying that the complex exhibits geometrical isomerism. And if you see the coordination number, it is 4. So coordination number 4 and it is exhibiting geometrical isomerism. That means it must be square planar complex. That means the given complex is square planar. Examiner himself is saying that. Okay, that is one thing. And he is asking select the correct statements about the complex, and he has given the electronic configuration of iridium. So by looking at the configuration, we can conclude that iridium belongs to cobalt group. Okay. And the complex is IR, one ligand Cl, another ligand carbon monoxide, and triphenylphosphine. So this complex is a heteroleptic complex. Complex containing more than one type of ligands, heteroleptic complex. Okay, and if you see the IUPAC name, carbonyl chlorido, alphabetical order, and bis triphenylphosphine, iridium. Overall complex is neutral, so the name of the metal ion does not change. You can use the elemental name iridium, that's it. and oxidation state of iridium overall 0, neutral ligand and Cl minus. So it is +1. So the IUPAC nomenclature is correct. The hybridization of the metal ion is sp3. No way. Because we already concluded that taking the indirect evidence given in the question, the complex is square planar. So if it is square planar complex, the hybridization is dsp2, not sp3. Okay, then the spin-only magnetic moment of the complex is 0. Square planar complexes. And one more thing you all recall, 4D and 5D elements, they always form square planar complexes as long as coordination number is 4. PT plus 2, PD plus 2, AU plus 3, AG plus, of course AG plus does not form actually tetra coordinated complexes, but others. So iridium also belongs to the 4th or 5th periods. So it is a square planar complex. Obviously it has to be a square planar complex. And when a complex forms square planar shape, all its electrons are paired up, and that is the reason why it is a dsp2 hybridization. So IR plus, so its configuration becomes 5d7 6s1. Now there will be pairing, complete pairing, and on pairing this becomes 5d8. So one d orbital will be vacant, and that participates in the hybridization. So it must be a diamagnetic complex. There is no unpaired electron. All electrons have got paired up. So the spin-only magnetic moment is 0. That is correct. Third option is correct. The complex has 3 isomers. Now in fact, if you see its the shape, iridium, then CO, Cl, PPH3, PPH3. This is one particular isomer. And if you see another isomer, CO, Cl, PPH3 and PPH3. They are the only 2 isomers possible. And in this complex, no linkage isomerism, so because there is no ambidentate ligand. And only 2 geometrical isomers are possible, no optical activity. Square planar complex cannot be optically active. So that particular statement is wrong. So the answer is D. Okay. Now come to 25th question. Which of the following will give HCl or HF on hydrolysis? Same, similar to 23rd question. So we have PCl 5, and on complete hydrolysis, PCl 5 gives H3PO4 plus HCl. 5 molecules of water attack 1 molecule of PCl 5. All the halide ions come out, and after that water molecules are eliminated. And you know, water molecules continue to get eliminated until there is no p-pi bonding, because the third period elements cannot form p-pi bonding. So until, as long as you don't have p-pi bonding, no problem, and until that point you continue to eliminate water molecules. So H3PO4. And SF6 does not undergo hydrolysis, if you remember. Maybe steric hindrance is the reason. This does not undergo hydrolysis at all. Now XeF4, XeF2, SF6, these are some of the exceptions to the logical approach of that hydrolysis. Now then NCl3, yes, we will get the answer logically here. Chlorine has the partial positive charge, so water attacks chlorine, not nitrogen, and as a result you will get the products ammonia plus HOCl. And we have one more compound, BF3. BF3 undergoes only partial hydrolysis, but the products are H3BO3 plus HF. Okay. Now answer for this question will be A, 1, and 4. You should get HF or HCl. Okay. Now come to 26th question. Chloride of A, metal A, reacting with Na2S2O3 to give B plus NaCl. And B plus Cu, you are getting that metal. That means copper is able to reduce the metal ion. A plus or A2 plus or A3 plus, we don't know its charge, but copper is able to displace A. So just all of you recall which metals can be displaced by copper. Gold, silver. These are some of the few metals which can be displaced by copper. Zinc cannot be displaced by copper, iron cannot be displaced by copper. So some possibilities for A, silver, gold. Okay. The nitrate of A when treated with NH4OH, aqueous ammonia, gives a brown precipitate. So it can be silver. Ag plus reacts with NH4OH or NaOH to give Ag2O, which is brown in color, which dissolves in excess of the reagent. Yes, it forms a complex. AgNH3 taken twice plus. So in all probability, the metal can be silver. So if you take that as a silver, then D is AgNH3 taken twice NO3. Yes, generally coordination number of silver is 2. Metal A can be extracted by hydrometallurgy. Yes. First silver ore Ag2S is treated with Cn minus aqueous medium. You will get cyano complex of that silver. Then that cyano complex is treated with a highly electropositive metal like zinc. Then zinc can displace silver. So hydrometallurgy. All of you, do you remember in metallurgy we have all the metallurgical operations which occur in water, hydrometallurgy. All metallurgical operations which occur at high temperature, pyrometallurgy. Okay, so option B is correct. Then a compound B is a linear complex. Yeah, 2 ligands, obviously linear. Compound D can oxidize ketone. So AgNH3 taken twice plus Tollens reagent. Nothing but Tollens reagent. And Tollens reagent cannot oxidize a ketone. So that statement is wrong. Statement D is wrong, and he is asking incorrect option. So D is the correct option for us. Now let us come to the next question. 27th question. Addition of Cu plus 2 ions to glycine at its isoelectric point results in the formation of a chelate complex CuGly thrice minus 1. Select the correct statement. Okay, if you see the structure of glycine at its isoelectric point, so it is NH3 plus CH2 COO minus, Zwitter ionic form of glycine. Now, if you write down all the equilibria that exist, then this is the conjugate base of this compound NH3 plus CH2 COOH, of course plus H plus. Now this further dissociates because it is a dibasic acid. Still it can donate one H plus. So you will get NH2, CH2, COO minus plus H plus. Now, which is the ligand which species can act as a ligand? Which species can combine with Cu plus 2? The last one, the anionic species. It is a bidentate ligand. COO minus is the donor site. O minus is one of the donor sites. Nitrogen is another donor site. So when you add Cu plus 2, this starts combining with Cu plus 2 and this entire equilibrium is shifted in the forward direction. And when the equilibrium is shifted in the forward direction, amount of H plus will increase. When amount of H plus will increase, pH decreases. So if you see the options, after addition of Cu plus 2, pH decreases. Yes, it is correct. No change in pH, wrong. pH increases, wrong. CuGly thrice minus 1 is a diamagnetic complex. Actually, in that complex, CuGly thrice minus 1. Oxidation state of copper is plus 2, and that means its configuration is D9. D10S1, that is copper. When you remove 2 electrons, it becomes D9. And you cannot completely pair 9 electrons. It is impossible. However you arrange them, there is one unpaired electron left. So this complex cannot be diamagnetic. It has to be paramagnetic. So option D is wrong. So A is the correct option. A is the only correct option. Okay, now let us come to the next question. A sample consisting of 3 moles of diatomic perfect gas at 200 Kelvin is compressed reversibly. So this is the key word. And adiabatically. Until its temperature reaches 250 Kelvin. Okay, you are compressing, adiabatic process, work is done, no heat exchanged, so temperature will increase, that is okay. But he is asking what is delta S system. It is reversible and it is adiabatic. So we all know delta S is equal to Q reversible upon T. And for a reversible process, and if it is adiabatic, then we can write down this as ds is equal to dq reversible upon T. So for each and every step of that reversible process, you know, reversible process has infinite number of steps. And for each step, delta S is 0. And for all steps together, it is 0. And we know a reversible adiabatic process is an isoentropic process. So it is 0. So 0 is the answer. Correct option is A. Okay, now let us come to 29th question. A sample of perfect gas that initially occupies 15 liters. So V1 is equal to 15 liters. T1 is equal to 250 Kelvin. And P1 is equal to 1 atm. Compressed isothermally. To what volume must the gas be compressed? So V2 is asked to reduce its entropy by 5 joule per Kelvin. To reduce its entropy. So delta S is equal to minus 5 joule per Kelvin. Delta S is S final minus S initial. And you are reducing the entropy. So final entropy is lesser than the initial entropy. That is logical because we are compressing the gas. When you compress the gas at constant temperature, volume will decrease. So delta S will be minus 5. So the expression will be minus 5 joule per Kelvin is equal to delta S is equal to NR ln V final minus V initial plus NCV ln T2 upon T1, final temperature upon initial temperature. Here temperature is constant. So the second part of the expression becomes 0. So it is NR ln V2 upon V1. Okay, here we can replace this NR. PV is equal to NRT and you can write down Nr is equal to PV upon T. Now we can write down this as minus 5 joule per Kelvin, that is equal to PV upon T ln V2 upon V1. Nr can be replaced with PV upon T. But only thing is that be careful, pressure must be taken in pascals, volume meter cube, so temperature anyway Kelvin square. So if you substitute the values, then pressure given is 1 atm, so approximately 10 power 5 pascals. Volume given is 15 liters, so 15 into 10 power minus 3 meter cube upon temperature 250 Kelvin ln V2, that is the final volume, and V1 is 15 liters, and V2 will come in liters. Okay. So if you calculate, you will get 6.6 liters. So option C is correct option. Now let us come to the 30th question. Enthalpy of vaporization of chloroform is given 29.4 kilojoule per mole. Normal boiling point of chloroform is given to you, and he is asking delta S system and delta S surroundings. And you all know the phase change, vaporization process is a reversible process, and for a reversible process, total entropy of the universe, that means entropy of the surroundings and entropy of the system. So there will be no change in the total entropy. Once you arrive at a reversible process, once you arrive at an equilibrium situation, so delta S will be 0. Delta S total will be equal to 0. So whatever may be the gain is the loss in the case of surroundings, and vice versa. So the answer will be x and minus x. And what is that x? Okay. So we can write down delta S system is equal to Q reversible upon T, because all phase changes occur at constant pressure and constant temperature. We can replace that Q reversible with delta H, and we can write down delta H vaporization upon temperature, that is boiling point. So that is equal to enthalpy of vaporization 29.4, that means 29400 joule per mole upon the boiling point is 334.88 Kelvin. Now this is what is delta S system. Now delta S surroundings is equal to, you can write down minus delta H vaporization upon temperature. Q reversible for system and minus Q reversible for surroundings. Because whatever system is gaining, whatever heat system is gaining, that heat is coming from surroundings only. So, and if you remember, every process is a reversible process from surroundings point of view. Surroundings are enormous. So, all processes in surroundings are reversible. So, now the answer will be minus 29400 joule per mole upon 334.88 Kelvin. Here actually let me make you recall one law in second law of thermodynamics, that is Troughton's law. Actually answer for this question is 87.8 joule per Kelvin per mole, that is delta S system, minus 87.8 joule per Kelvin per mole, that is for surroundings. Actually Troughton observed that entropy of vaporization of almost all the liquids is approximately same, and that is around 85 joule per Kelvin per mole. And there may be 2 or 3 exceptions actually, and the exceptions to this particular rule are water, ammonia, where a strong association is present, hydrogen bonding. So water is an exception, ammonia is an exception, and if you ignore these three or four exceptions, and for the rest of the liquids, entropy of vaporization is almost constant, and it is around 85 joule per Kelvin per mole. That is what is Troughton's law. Okay. Now come to 31st question. 2 moles of an ideal gas are cooled isochorically so keeping volume constant, you are cooling that mixture. So heat is withdrawn from the system. So as a result, pressure decreases and then expanded isobarically. Expansion, keeping the pressure constant, you expanded that to bring the gas temperature back to the initial value. And that means temperature here, if it is T1, then temperature here, of course moles will remain same, moles won't change, and the temperature will remain here T1. You are doing that isobaric expansion to bring its temperature back to its original value. So that means keeping pressure constant, you are expanding it. That means you are providing heat. You provide a dq amount of heat. So by absorbing that heat, the temperature will increase by dt, and then the piston moves up. So pressure will remain same again. Now again you supply the temperature, piston will move up, again you supply the temperature. So like that, keeping pressure constant, if you are expanding the gas, that means you are increasing the temperature. So temperature will increase. So in the first step, temperature decreased, and to bring that temperature back to its original value, you are expanding it isobarically. So that means if you take from initial to final, temperature is constant. Although in the first step, in the intermediate step, it decreases. So then we can apply the formula delta S is equal to NR ln P1 upon P2. Then he has told us that pressure changed 3.3 times. Pressure changed, pressure decreased or increased. See, first one cooling isochorically. So in that step, pressure decreases. And next you are doing isobaric process, pressure constant. So that means if you compare initial pressure with final pressure, then pressure decreases. Okay. So then you can apply here moles, 2 moles into 8.314 into ln 3.3, because initial pressure is greater than the final pressure. So it becomes ln 3.3, and the correct answer will be approximately 20 joule per Kelvin. Now let us see the 33rd question. Delta F H naught of Br2 liquid is 0. Delta F H naught of Br2 liquid is equal to 0. And in statement 2 he defined standard enthalpy of formation of a substance. It should be in standard state. It should be formed from its constituent elements which are in their standard states. Okay. And if you write down that reaction, if you change the definition into a reaction, formation of Br2 liquid in its standard state from its constituent element. So element is also Br2 liquid, because we have to take the element also in standard state. And standard state of bromine is nothing but liquid form of bromine at 1 bar pressure. So Br2 liquid at 1 bar is converted into Br2 liquid at 1 bar. Everything is same. So delta H of this reaction is 0 obviously. So statement 2 is actually explaining statement 1. Okay. Now come to 34th question. So one scientist found that there were 2 different compounds with the same molecular formula. In that there is one ambidentate ligand, NO2. So in one complex N is attached, in another complex O is attached, and those 2 complexes have different colors. So in the statement 1, the information given to you is CONH3 taken 5 times NO2 when N is attached and outside Cl2. Similarly, we have CONH3 taken 5 times ONO and outside Cl2. So in the statement it is given that the first compound is yellow in color and the second compound is red in color. Yes, that is correct statement. That is basically information and that is a correct statement. So you should have that information. When N is attached, it is yellow in color, and when O is attached, it is red in color. And it is given in the textbook. Okay. Now in the statement 2, it is given that NO2, when N is attached, when N is the donor atom, it is a stronger ligand, strong field ligand. So that octahedral splitting energy will be greater. And when it is ONO, it is a weak field ligand. So when a donor atom is nitrogen, then it is a strong ligand. And in that case, the color is yellow. And when the donor atom is oxygen, then it is a weak field ligand. And in that case, the color is red. And is it logically linked? Whether this particular information can explain why that is yellow and this is red? Is it a connection? Is there a connection between strength of the ligand and color of the ligand? Let us see. Suppose if you take the color wheel, violet, blue, green, yellow, orange, red. So all of you recall, the color of the complex is not the color which is absorbed. Color of the complex is the average of the colors which are not absorbed. We call that color, average color, as the complementary color of the color absorbed. So if you come to this complex where nitrogen is attached, so let us say this is complex number 1 and this is complex number 2, and that is yellow in color. If that is yellow in color, that complex is actually absorbing violet color. So complex number 1 is absorbing violet color. Let me write down, it is in the brackets. So the color absorbed is violet. And the second complex is red in color. So the color absorbed is green. And which wavelength, or which you can say which energy is greater? Energy of violet is greater or green is greater? Violet is greater. And that is what we are expecting. It is a stronger field ligand, so the gap between T2G and EG orbitals is greater in that case. So it absorbs a color of higher energy, lower wavelength. So statement 2 is clearly explaining the statement 1. So A is the correct answer. Now let us come to 35th question. Resonance energy of acetate ion is greater than that of the conjugate base of acetone. So CH3 COO minus, resonance energy of this is greater than CH3 CO CH2 minus. And all of you please keep in mind, you all know that whenever we compare the thermodynamic parameters, enthalpy of hydrogenation, enthalpy of combustion, resonance energy, we always compare the magnitude. In fact, enthalpy of hydrogenation is almost always negative. Enthalpy of combustion is also almost always negative, 99%. Resonance energy is always negative. But we always compare the magnitudes. And resonance energy, magnitude of resonance energy, if you see, the magnitude is directly proportional to the difference in the energies between the most stable resonating structure and the resonance hybrid. You know, it actually the definition of resonance energy is energy of the resonance hybrid. That means enthalpy of the resonance hybrid minus enthalpy of the most stable resonating structure. And hybrid is always more stable than the most stable resonating structure. So as a result, the resonance energy comes out to be negative always. So that if you compare the magnitude, you just look at the difference between most stable resonating structure and hybrid. More the difference between those two, more is the resonance energy. So if you see first acetate ion, now acetate ion has two equally stable resonating structures, exactly equally stable. So CH3CO minus double bond O, and the hybrid looks like this, partial negative, and this partial negative is exactly -1/2. This is partial bond, and bond order is 1.5, and bond order here also 1.5. Now if you come to this case, then CH3 C double bond O CH2 minus, and its resonating structure is CH3 CO minus. Let me write down O minus here, and here double bond O CH2 minus. And if you see the hybrid, then it is CH3 C O partial negative, partial bonds, and CH2 partial bond, partial negative. Now, if you see this case, conjugate base of acetone, out of these two resonating structures, this is more stable. So the most stable resonating structure and the hybrid, the difference between these two arises because of the contribution of this structure. If this structure were not there, then obviously the most stable resonating structure and hybrid would be same. So resonance energy will be 0. So magnitude of the resonance energy depends upon the extent of contribution of the structure. Same is the logic here. And which structure is contributing to the more stable resonating structures? Obviously this structure, because contribution of this structure is 50%, and contribution of this structure is less than 50% because out of these two that is more stable. So obviously resonance energy in the case of acetate ion will be greater in magnitude. So the magnitude of the resonance energy is directly proportional to the difference in energies between the most stable resonating structure and the resonance hybrid. And the difference between the energies of those two will be directly proportional to the contribution of the other less stable structures. So more the contribution from the less stable structure, more is the resonance energy. And here the contribution is 50%, maximum contribution. You cannot have contribution from the second structure more than 50%. So the maximum resonance energy here. So resonance energy of acetate ion is higher. Now let us come to the comprehension 36 to 38. Okay, in this comprehension, a cylindrical vessel of fixed volume is divided into three sections, S1, S2 and S3. So it has a fixed volume. Boundaries are rigid. Now divided into three sections, S1, S2 and S3. Sections S1 and S2 are separated by an adiabatic piston. So this piston is adiabatic. And sections S2 and S3 are separated by a diathermic piston. This piston is diathermic, which allows heat energy to flow through it. Both pistons are frictionless, so freely moving. Initially, each section contains 1 mole. So 1 mole, 1 mole and 1 mole each section. Then pressure 1 bar, 1 bar and 1 bar. Final temperatures are also same, 298 Kelvin, 298 Kelvin and 298 Kelvin. So obviously volumes should be same, mole same, pressure same, temperature same. So initially the volumes of the three sections must be same. The gas in S1 is heated slowly until the temperature of the gas in S3 reaches 348 Kelvin. And here the final temperature is 348 Kelvin. Final volume is also given S3 and that is 16.7 liters. This is the final volume. Okay, so what we can do first, initially we can calculate the volume of each section. And if you calculate volume of each section, first step, V is equal to V initial of course, and V initially same in all the three sections, nRT upon P. This is volume of each section. Now here, this particular piston is adiabatic. So into S2 and S3, no heat is coming. And final volume of S3 is 16.7 liters. And pistons are freely moving. And this piston is diathermic. So that means between S2 and S3, if you compare S2 and S3, just for the timing, forget about S1. Initial conditions of S2 and S3, all conditions are same. Number of moles, pressure, volume, temperature. And can I say that all conditions in the final state are also same for these two sections? Freely moving piston and a diathermic piston, it is diathermic. So moles cannot change in those two sections because those sections are closed sections, they are not open. So moles will not change, and because it is a freely moving piston, pressure will not change. And no heat is coming into that S2, only work is done. So the temperatures in both the sections must be same. See, piston is freely moving and piston is diathermic. So how can you have two different temperatures in S2 and S3? How can you have two different pressures in S2 and S3? So final conditions will also be same. So I can write down final temperature in S2 must be 348 Kelvin. Final volume of S2 must be 16.7 liters. So what we can do is volume of S3 section S1 final is equal to 3 into Vi, this is the total initial volume, and total initial volume will be equal to total final volume, so no doubt at all. And from this, if you can subtract 16.7 into 2, because S2 volume 16.7 liters, S3 volume 16.7 liters, so 33.4. If you subtract 33.4 from 3 into Vi, and Vi can be calculated, we have relevant data for that, we will get the volume of the S1. And one more thing here, both the pistons are freely moving. Of course, one is adiabatic and another one is diathermic, but both the pistons are freely moving. So pressures in 3 sections cannot be different. So they must be same. So what we can do? We can calculate pressure in either S3 or S2. That will be same, of course. That is equal to nRT upon V, everything we know. And that will be equal to pressure in S1. So temperature of S1 section final is equal to PV upon RT, and this is PS1 final. So we know P, that is PS1 final, we know volume final, and we know R, sorry, here it is NR. So moles will not change, system is closed. So you will get the final temperature of the section 1. So using this one, we will get the answer for 36th. Now come to 37th. He is asking delta S values for section 2 and section 3. So, and for this 37th question, and one more thing, can I say that delta S values for section 2 and section 3 will be same? Because whatever may be the changes occurring in S2 and S3 is exactly same. Volume change, pressure change, temperature change, everything is same. So delta S will be same for both the sections. And we can calculate that with this formula, NR ln V2 upon V1 plus NCV molar ln T2 upon T1. And we know everything, every data. We can calculate V1 from this expression. V2 is given to you 16.7, and both temperatures are given to us in the question itself. So we can write down delta S, this one. And delta S2, that means for section 2, and delta S for section 3 will be exactly same. So by calculating, you will get the answer for 37. Now come to the 38th question. Now actually in 38th question he is asking what is the total energy that is applied to S1. And please distinguish all of you, he is not asking the total energy change of S1. He is asking total energy supplied, and there is a difference. See, we are supplying 100 kilojoules for example, heat, because we are heating actually the S1 section. We are not doing work on it. We are only supplying heat, and we have supplied 100 kilojoules. And section S1 has done some work on S2 and S3. Suppose that is equal to 30 kilojoules. So change in internal energy of the S1 will be only 70, but the energy supplied by us from outside will be 100. And he is asking energy supplied by us from outside, not the internal energy change. So we can write down delta U is equal to Q plus W. And in the question number 38, he is asking Q. And we can calculate here delta U first. Delta U is equal to N CV molar delta T. And here for CV, one mole of perfect diatomic gas. So CV is given to you, 5/2 R. You know delta T. We got the final temperature. We are given the initial temperature. We know the moles, so we can calculate delta U. Now, here W by S1, work done by S1. Can I say that that is nothing but equal to minus of work done on S2 and S3 together? See, there is no heat supply, heat exchange between S1 and S2. But the work done by section S1 will be exactly same in magnitude to the work done on S2 and S3. And the process, and if you can calculate work done on S2 and S3 together, how do you calculate this? This is adiabatic work. Because Q is 0. The process occurring in S2 and S3 is adiabatic. Because S1 and S2 are separated by adiabatic piston. So it is an adiabatic work. And work adiabatic is nothing but equal to delta U. And that is equal to NCV molar delta T. And here this is the work done on both the sections, S2 as well as S3. So we have to take N value 2 and CV molar 5 by 2 R. Temperature we know 348 minus 298, that is 50. So from this you will get work done on sections S2 and S3. That is nothing but equal to minus of the work done by S1. If you substitute that here, then you will get the Q value. Already we got delta U. Now from this analysis we got W, and you will get the Q value. And all of you please remember one thing. Here Q cannot be written as NCV molar delta T. Q cannot be written as NCP molar delta T, because volume is not constant. The process is not isochoric. The process is not even isobaric, because the pressure of S1 is changing, volume of S1 is changing. So there is no way you can equate Q with NCV molar delta T or NCP molar delta T. Okay. So this is how we can solve the three questions. Now come to the paragraph 2, question numbers 39 to 41. An inorganic salt A on heating up to 230 degrees Celsius forms B, losing water, and the loss of water is equivalent to 36.07% by weight. So A is a hydrous salt, water of crystallization. When you heat it, it loses some water of crystallization or the entire water of crystallization, and you are getting anhydrous salt or partially hydrous salt. And some of the B is dissolved in 1 liter of water. 100 ml of this 1 liter is treated with Ki, results in the formation of a brown solution with a precipitate. Actually, we have a solution in which there is a metal ion. You added Ki, that results in the formation of brown solution with a precipitate. So most probably the metal ion is Cu plus 2. Because when Cu plus 2 reacts with Ki, Cu plus 2 gets reduced to Cu plus, and I minus is oxidized to I2. But I2 is obtained in the form of I3 minus. Actually, because we have added excess Ki. So whatever I2 is produced, that combines with Ki, and you will get iodine in the form of Ki3. And its color is brown. And the color of the Cui precipitate is white. But because of the brown color, white color is not visible to us. The white color is masked by the brown color. And when you add hypo to that solution, which converts that Ki3 into I minus, which is colorless, then we can see the white color. So this is the sequence of reactions mentioned in the paragraph. Okay, now if you write down the reactions, okay, we have taken suppose CuSO4, and we have to check actually whether that loss in mass is matching with copper sulfate or not. Actually, copper sulfate, you all know it is pentahydrate, CuSO4 5H2O. And first all of you check whether the 36.07% loss is matching or not. And how many water molecules are going out? All the 5 or 4, that you can see. Because that is important for us to determine the molar mass of B. If it is anhydrous copper sulfate, then the molar mass of CuSO4 would be 64 plus 32 plus 64. But if any water of crystallization is retained, 1 or 2, then accordingly the molar mass changes. So that is the first step. Okay, then if you come to the reactions, CuSO4 plus Ki, that gives Ki3 potassium triiodide plus Cui, which is a precipitate, plus K2SO4. Now if you balance these reactions, Ki3 and Cui, and Ki iodine here 1 and there 4. So suppose if you put 2 CuSO4 here, you will get 2 Cui. In that case 5 iodines are there 5 Ki, and you can go for 2 K2SO4. Now next you treat this Ki3. Ki3 is nothing but Ki plus I2. So for all redox reactions, Ki3 can be taken to be I2. So absolutely no difference. As far as the redox reaction is concerned, there is absolutely no difference between Ki3 and I2. And you treat this compound with Na2S2O3 hypo. Iodine present here is converted into I minus, K plus, Na plus, no change in these two cations, and S2O3 minus 2 is converted into S4O6 minus 2, tetrathionate ion. And if you balance this, then here we will get 3I minus, Na2S2O3 2 moles are required, and 1 K plus and 4 Na plus, and S4O6 minus 2. Now this is the balanced reaction. The brown solution requires 20 ml of 0.25 molar Na2S2O3. So these are the millimoles of Na2S2O3. So then millimoles of Ki3 must be 10 into 0.25. These millimoles are coming from here only, 10 into 0.25. And in the question it is given, some amount of B is dissolved in 1 liter, and out of that only 100 ml is taken. So that means if you see the moles, millimoles of CuSO4 actually reacting here, that will be 20 into 0.25. But moles of CuSO4 dissolved in 1 liter, in 1 liter of water, that is equal to 20 into 0.25 into 10. Because out of total moles we have taken only 1/10 here. Out of 1 liter we have taken 100 ml. So out of total moles present in 1 liter we have taken only 1/10. So number of moles present in actual 1 liter will be 10 times this. Okay. Then if you come to Cui millimoles, it will be 2 into the millimoles of Ki3. So 20 into 0.25. So now in the first question, number of moles of Ki consumed is asked. So it will be 50 into 0.25 millimoles. You convert that into moles upon 1000. Then next question, what amount of salt B is dissolved in 1 liter of water? The weights are given, so this much amount into molar mass of CuSO4. Then number of moles of the precipitate formed asked, 20 into 0.25 upon 1000, because these are the millimoles and he is asking the moles. So we will get the answer for all the 3 questions. Now let us come to the matching questions. 42nd, if you see, then some complexes are given on the left hand side and their properties are given on the right hand side. Paramagnetic, diamagnetic nature, oxidation state, geometrical isomers. So suppose if you look at 2 complexes in that question, 42nd, CO, NH3 taken 4 times, H2O twice, and outside 2 counterans Cl minus, 2 Cl minus. So what is the charge of on central metal ion here? Plus 2. There is one more cobalt complex in that. CO, H2O taken 5 times Cl, and outside we have 1 chlorine, only 1 chlorine. So the charge on cobalt again must be plus 2. If you remember, in the case of CO plus 3, except F minus, there is pairing in all other cases, except F minus. But that exception is not valid to CO plus 2. In CO plus 2, only in the case of Cn minus and CO, there is pairing. There is no pairing in the case of water, in the case of ammonia, in the case of Cl minus, no, absolutely not. So in such case, these two complexes will be paramagnetic because D7 complexes. Cobalt D7 S2, so CO plus 2, remove 2 electrons, D7, and both of them are outer orbital complexes, not inner orbital complexes, and both of them are high spin complexes. So they are paramagnetic. So there you have to be very careful. Exception is with CO plus 3, not CO plus 2. Then PT NH3 taken twice Cl2, it exhibits geometrical isomerism. If you remember, cis isomer of that particular compound is an anti-cancer drug, cisplatin. And we have NiH2O taken 6 times Cl2. Here also the metal is in plus 2 oxidation state. Okay. Then if you come to 43rd, then here also complexes are given, and on the right side purely isomerism linked words are given. Optical, geometrical, ionization, linkage, these. So if you see the first complex, then it is 2 bidentate ligands, 2 monodentate ligands, differently exhibit geometrical isomerism, cis-trans, and one of them is optically active. Suppose if you see this particular isomer CO, then here water, cis isomer. I am talking about cis isomer. And here one bidentate ligand and here one bidentate ligand. So this is optically active. So that particular complex shows both geometrical as well as optical. Cis, trans. Trans is inactive because trans has planar symmetry, but cis is active. Okay, then PT, NH3, H2O, Cl2, it exhibits geometrical. No optical square planar complex cannot show optical isomerism. Then after that CO, NH3 taken 5 times NO2, it shows ionization isomerism. And you see this? CO, NH3 taken 5 times, NO2 inside and NO3 outside, twice. CO plus 3 complex, that is. Now if you add AgNO3 to this complex, nothing happens. But if you take its ionization isomer, that is CO NH3 taken 5 times NO3, and outside there is one NO2 and one NO3. Now you add AgNO3 to this particular complex aqueous solution, you will get a white PPT of AgNO2. AgNO3 is soluble, but AgNO2 is insoluble. So it is a double displacement reaction. Okay, so it shows ionization isomerism. It shows linkage isomerism also, because NO2 is their ambidentate ligand. And in the end, last you are given one complex, that is COEN thrice Cl3. So this does not exhibit optical isomerism, geometrical isomerism, but it shows optical isomerism. Okay. And if you come to the last question, then all the common names are given and their methods of preparations are given. And I told you at the beginning of this paper discussion, in P block, one important topic is hydrolysis of halides. And you have to be very thorough in that. Your preparation should be in such a way that if one question is, maximum one question can come from that topic, and you should get 100% from that. Maybe it is more than one option question, maybe single option question. And in P block, another such topic is oxo acids. So be prepared. 100% performance in these important topics, major topics. Okay, and what is phosphinic acid? H3PO2, which is also called as hypophosphorus acid. Then what is hypophosphoric acid? It is H4P2O6, which has PP linkage. What is metaphosphoric acid? HPO3 taken N times. You all know this is the compound obtained whenever P4O6O10 acts as a dehydrating agent. Okay, then what is pyrophosphorus acid? Pyrophosphorus acid is nothing but you take 2 moles H3PO3, you remove 1 water molecule from that, whatever is remaining H4P2O5. So this is hypophosphorus acid. And their method of preparations are given on the right side. You should remember, all of you remember all the method of preparations because they are given in NCERT. So this is the basic information we should know. Okay.